Welcome to Militarisation 5 Sweden's podcast. Here we discuss Swedish society, Europe, and our political present. But above all, what it takes to build a brighter future. My name is Adam, and I'm a member of Militarisation 5 Sweden and DM25. Militarisation 5 is the Swedish political branch of the European movement, which is called DM, Democracy in Europe Movement, a movement founded to democratize Europe and to create politics that put people and the planet before profit. And in today's episode, we have John Oberg. And please tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes, I'd be pleased to, and thank you very much for having me. I am a Danish citizen living for a little more than 50 years in Sweden. If you go for the background of this conversation, I have a PhD in sociology and I'm a docent in peace studies. And I have been a free person since 1989 when I left Lund University and have been a professor around the world, but also a mediator in a number of international conflicts such as Kosovo. And I am the co-founder with my wife and director of the Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research, which is totally people-financed, has nothing to do with governments or corporations, which means that we do free research. And we are also about the last doing peace and conflict studies, if you define it as an attempt to understand violence and reduce it as much as possible. CPRI doesn't do that. PRIO in Oslo doesn't do that. The other peace research departments in our universities are not focused on that. They are focused much more on understanding war. Well, that's important. But peace research is like medicine. You do a diagnosis, you do a prognosis, and you do a treatment with the aim of reducing the disease called violence. I think this will be enough for you, for your...
Well put.
Thank you.
And I'm going to start. I know that I wanted to focus on Sweden as this is the Swedish branch of DM, but I would like to start off with what went wrong with the West and Europe from your perspective of peace and also political.
How many hours do we have?
You can give us a brief words here, if you have one.
No, well, let me just start out with a macro perspective, which is very simple. All empires go down. All empires has a period where they go up, and they have a period where they go down. And this is what is happening now to the Western West. West fell apart in around 1991 with the fall of the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. I predicted at that time that the next one to fall would be the Western West. And that is what is happening now. The United States is over-militarized, and the West is over-militarized with NATO, is overextended, trying to control more than it has resources to control. It loses day by day legitimacy in the eyes of others. It has a comparatively or relatively weaker and weaker economy, and is now also dissolving democracy. The America under the Trump regime because it's not an administration or government, it's basically a one-man show with some people behind him, ruled by decree and statements on press conferences. You know, when that happens, it's the end of the empire. And those who are waiting for something else are waiting for a multipolar, not a unipolar world. And that multipolar world, China and India and Africa and others will play a very important role, and we will become a periphery. We in the West, who makes up 12% of humanity. I'm not saying this with any joy. I have always believed that the West has contributed culturally and in other ways a lot to the world. But what we do now is totally self-destructive. We see enemies everywhere. China is an enemy, Russia is an enemy, everybody who's not like us and who have not bought the Christian missionary idea that they should have democracy and human rights and economy like us. They are our enemies because they are different. That's actually, if you go to NATO, the only argument for seeing China as an enemy is that they are different from us. I say, thank God somebody is different from us, because that makes the world so much richer, so much more exciting, so much more potentially fascinating in terms of development. If we are all one and the same, I don't want any single ideology, philosophy, or way of thinking, not even Gandhi's, to be spread all over the world. We must live in unity and diversity. And that's what the West is refusing. and the only way you can then go is down. So that's what it is. And of course, Sweden and the European Union are part of this West, which is going down. But you can recognize it or not. Our politicians will not recognize it. They are not intellectuals. They are rather poor when it comes to seeing their own history, and they're doing terribly wrong things now vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis China, Iran, Gaza, of course, and the Palestinians. All signs of downfall, decline, and, if you will, moral decay. I belong to those who think we should talk about ethics when we talk about politics too. Just saying politics has always been a raw game, a cynical game of power. Yeah, but then you accept it. It should not have been. So, long story short, that's the situation we're in, and that's, of course, where you and I are sitting in Sweden, and Sweden is no longer an alternative, which it was long ago. In many ways, it's one of the flock, and it will go down, and it'll militarize itself to death like the rest of the West.
That's
I'm
well,
very sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not saying this as, again, with
no,
no happiness. No
there
happiness
is no
at all.
happiness, and I know your words resonate a lot with the founder of DiEM25, Yanis Varoufakis. When they founded DiEM25, I was thinking how they try to explain the 25 at the end of DiEM25, and that is when it started. So they
Mm,
added the
mm.
25 because they believed in 2025 democracy in Europe will start to decay, it will start to fail.
Yeah.
So in that sense, they were correct, but again, they're not saying this with joy either. They created a movement to create an alternative, something that can, you have to have hope in these
Oh,
dark times.
absolutely. We're coming to that. We're coming
Yeah,
to that. I'm not a pessimist, but
no,
I
exactly,
just think
exactly,
that there's a great world outside the West, but I'm sad that the West has gone
exactly.
self-destructive. There is nobody who wants to destroy the West. There's nobody who wants to destroy the West. It's the West seeing enemies everywhere, treating others as enemies and saying they're out to get our throat. That is not true. Anything you hear from China is we want to cooperate with the West. We must solve problems together. That's what everybody is saying in the world nowadays. Just not the West. We can do on our own. I want Greenland. I
Yeah,
want the resources of Ukraine. Want Gaza, Las Vegas, and not because I care at all about the genocide, but I want the resources outside Gaza. This is autarky. This is the idea that I grab the resources I need to become an island, and I don't care about the rest of the world. That's Trump's U.S. Vision. The United States of autarky. That's very destructive and very self-destructive for the United States. But let's move on.
it is heartening to see also that the Western media falls in line, and I think me as young person, haven't lived that long as you have. Just if you travel, if you go to another country, maybe this won't be in the future, but we have nothing to fear from other countries. When we travel to other countries, we are very much welcomed. Uh,
We're talking about decoupling from others. Imagine that the rest of the world, the 88% of humanity, would say, let's decouple from the West. I mean, who are we to try to decouple from them? The term itself is sick.
Yeah, yeah, and I think to people to grasp what we're saying here, I think Sweden is a very good example. Not a good example of how we have acted, but an example of how we've
Of the
not
decay.
acted, how
Of the
we have
decay.
been starting to. So maybe you can start with what went wrong with Sweden.
Well, I wouldn't say it's Sweden only. I would say it's the
No,
Nordic countries because we had very much in common. We had different solutions to security politics, but we always took each other into account. And that was actually a quite beautiful model. Let me go back to the, if you will, history of it. I think that a few factors that are very important in all the Nordic countries. One was that the Social Democratic Party was a society builder. It was a constructor of a new type of society where we uplifted those who did not have so much. The workers, the poor people, the welfare state was a central idea. Equality was a central idea. Women's rights were a central idea. And we had a liberal educational system that you followed, of course, school, primary school, secondary school, university, what it was, but you also had people's colleges that played an important role in terms of cultural bildning. cultural education above the formal educational system. And we had what we call small schools. That were schools which could, follow the Neil philosophy or whatever it was. Experimental openness. We had experimental universities doing things in a new way, such as at the time Roskilde and Aalborg in Denmark. Now, the Social Democratic Party stopped being a Social Democratic Party long ago. It has a name. It's no longer a Social Democratic Party. I think the Swedish author P.O. Enquist has said it very well. He said something to the effect that social democracy is a movement or a party that no longer has a story to tell. In a way, they succeeded. You got the labor unions, you got everybody getting a better education, you get welfare, you got the house, you got this and that, and then there was nothing coming after that. So today, the Social Democratic Party stands for absolutely nothing but a kind of muddling through in the middle and getting more and more right-wing, particularly in security politics. Whereas if I'm that old, if you go back to Olof Palme, Willy Brandt, Bruno Kreisky, Urho Kekkonen, Anker Jörgensen, you had real social democratic people. And they were also people who were close to two things, their own people and the people of the world. Democratic movement was a kind of solidarity also. When small countries were, rolled over by somebody big, they would be then saying, that's not good. We must call the United Nations to. That was very much Olof Palme's thinking, and I am proud to have had one long conversation with him and understanding how he was thinking about these things. Secondly, I think the joining of the European Union has meant mainstreaming. The kind of ability to do creative different things such as a neutrality politics, advanced, future thinking that Sweden stood for when I came here 50 plus years ago. Something that has been mainstreamed away. We have to have one common policy. Now, the funny thing is, or the tragic thing is, there is no one common policy. They all split. And let me add to you, which most people have forgotten. It says in the Lisbon Treaty, which I analyzed 25 years ago, and came to the conclusion that it cannot make peace in the way it's written. But it says in its preamble that the purpose of the European Union is to make peace inside the Union and in the rest of the world. Now, they never define what that means, but they use the unity and diversity somewhere in their formulation. Now, that one has only once practiced to have exactly one unified policy in a foreign policy situation. And that was when, about 25 years ago, no, that must be longer, drop that, they decided to recognize Slovenia and Croatia out of old Yugoslavia. Now, at that time, some of us, including Johan Galton, including Peres de Cuellar, the UN Secretary General, German ambassador in Yugoslavia, etc., all say, for Christ's sake, don't do that. If you take out Slovenia and Croatia of Yugoslavia, you will have a war in Bosnia. We were right. The EU was wrong. Because you had the war in Bosnia, it was made unavoidable. That's a long story that I cannot do here because it'll take me half an hour to explain, the history and the population, the structures and blah, blah, blah. But it was very clear that with taking out Croatia and Slovenia, which the Germans wanted particularly, the rest of Yugoslavia would fall apart and there would be war in Bosnia. Now, in 2012, the European Union got the Nobel Peace Prize. Believe it or not, when you look at what they do today, Nobel Peace Prize is rather intellectually totally corrupt. Let's not go into that. But my point is, we would have had a much more lively foreign policy if we had done what the Nordic countries did, namely always take each other into consideration, see where we can work together. But the idea of a one uniform foreign policy of the European Union is totally bonkers. It's bizarre. The whole idea is wrong. So you can say, I'm happy that it wasn't practiced, but what I'm saying is the then biggest war in Europe, and I tell you, Yugoslavia has changed the world much more than people are aware of, much more than the fall of the wall. What happened there was fundamentally a game changer, also for a catastrophe in terms of conflict resolution. That only time when they actually did what the Lisbon Treaty says. led to, the most nasty war, and probably at least 100,000 more people killed in Bosnia then. So that was the second factor, the joining of the European Union. And then I think the third totally destructive thing, of course, is that now all countries are members of NATO, an organization that should have been abolished when the Warsaw Pact fell upon. We argued this in our foundation. I said it publicly. There is no raison d'etre for NATO, which otherwise, by the way, is a very dangerous organization because of its deterrence philosophy and its nuclear first use policy and its expansionism. But long story short, against all promises given to Gorbachev, we expanded NATO, now 10 countries, and the 11th, the people were stupid enough to do the 11th, and that was Ukraine, which everybody knew from Kissinger to Oberg that this can never work. This will lead to war. I'm not defending the invasion, but I'm just saying this was totally predictable. In the long run, I didn't expect Putin would invade it at that time. I actually wrote the day before that it will not happen. In hindsight, if you look at the last 30 years, you would see that that is the way it goes.
Yeah, and
NATO membership for the Nordic countries means uniform thinking, no intellectual. You don't have to have a foreign minister anymore. You can call Washington and say, "What are we supposed to do? Waste money." You don't have to waste money on foreign ministries in the Nordic countries anymore. And then finally, 42 American military bases in the Nordic countries. Now, this is the end of whatever was Nordic balance, Nordic peace policy, Nordic justice, Nordic equality thing, because we will have to pay for all this. And the economists' first law is you cannot have the cake after you have eaten it. And when you spend 5%, which is a totally idiotic, anti-intellectual measurement, that's not how you do it. When you spend 5% of your gross national product in a situation where Europe is in crisis, deep crisis, negative economic growth in Germany, then you are going to destroy the rest of the whatever, if there's anything left of it, of the welfare state, the equality thinking, and the dynamic social, cultural development that I believe the Nordic countries always stood for. So that's my summary.
And there's so many things for people to think about here. Like we are currently living in a high risk or like unemployment for young people. So we are already feeling it, but I don't feel like the middle class or people in my parents' age are really thinking how bad things have gotten, even for young people as myself. As a young lawyer, when I graduated law school a year ago, I remember being like very excited. You had these promises, and then I had to apply for over 400 jobs just to get my first one. And it was a horrible experience. It was 8 months of job applications, and
I
still
can
I have a lot
imagine.
of my classmates that are not getting employed. So we are already
I
starting.
have an idea for you, Adam. I
Yeah.
think you should become a peace researcher because there's no place you can get a job in that. So you can be a freewheeling like me. You don't
Yeah.
have to do 400 applications for a job because there are no such jobs.
No, exactly, and I think on your point there, I think that's basically what I am doing. I resigned from my job that I got. But yeah, long story short, I found it was a quite unethical law firm. I couldn't. It was hard to have the
Good you did
opinion.
that. Good you did that. Civil courage is a very important part of democracy
Yes, it is. It is, and I didn't want to have the pain.
and the free society.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what I did basically was that I started writing freelance and about a lot of things really, but I focus on more justice for the global south because I read a lot of research
Right,
about
right.
exploitation, and therefore I ended up now going to embark on this investment treaty arbitration master program.
I can hear. I will not read you in the Swedish mainstream press, but
No, no, no.
that's a sign of your quality.
Yeah, no, no, no. You've already felt it. If you stand up and you have a voice today that is not mainstream, you're getting very we used in social media. You're getting very shadow banned and you're getting very judged. And I know you. Yeah, and
Yes. I
you
tell you,
lose
Adam,
friends, you
just
lose
my own
family.
story, if it's interesting to you. Your story was I was one of the most frequently used people, at least in Denmark, where I came from as a young man. Wrote in Politiken, a liberal newspaper resembling Dagens Nyheter in Sweden, for 25 years. And I was on radio and television basically all the time as a peace researcher. I came to Sweden. I participated in quite a few programs too and wrote articles. I haven't been there the last 20 years. I sit on media all over the world outside the West. Nobody in the West. When I came home, I was the only person who had been in Aleppo in December 2016 when it was liberated from al-Nusra occupation.
Yeah, and
I was in
also for the
contact with 40 Western media. Not one decided finally to publish my story.
no, and also
Go
for
on
the
like that.
viewers.
It's totally isolation. And today I work with 10 media in China, and I work with Russian media. I work with American small radio stations. I work with Australian media. I work with everything else. But my own countries?
Yeah.
No way. I know I'm manipulated away. I told you before the program started how they do it in the Swedish television. It's absolutely hilarious. But it's total censorship.
Yeah. And also for the context for the viewers, the only way I found Jan Oberg today that even he has joined this podcast is because I saw a podcast that was produced from China. So I didn't even find him from my own
Right.
country's
And then
media.
they say I'm paid by the Communist Party.
Oh yeah, yeah. They like. I don't know how you deal with that, but I get thrown a lot that I'm a communist these days, and I'm just embracing it. You know, I'm saying like, fair enough.
Exactly. But that points to one thing I think is important to say about the intellectual level of the West today. If you have other views, alternative views, they are not discussed. You're not met with serious arguments. You're not said this is wrong, or can you explain why you have such strange views, for instance, being against NATO membership for Sweden? And yes, I can. No, then you are just categorized and you're cancelled. I mean, if you say, for instance, Ukraine is a little bit more difficult than a full-scale, unprovoked invasion of Russia into Ukraine. You say, something happened 30 years before that, and there was da-da-da-da-da, and maybe it's not so easy, and maybe da-da-da. Then you're a Putin lover.
Yeah, and I
It
know.
does, you're not met with the argument that this is the wrong analysis, or this is not what it was caused it. You're just a Putin lover, and therefore we cannot talk with you. This is the end of intellectualism, and I tell you, it's the end of democracy too, because discussion, dialogue, debate, and knowledge has disappeared.
And I know that a lot of people that have their top of mind, if I say, a lot of people here think that Palestine was founded on the 7th of October. You know, that's a similar analogy people can relate. Yeah, just for the record, you know, you have to go back a lot of more years. You know, you can start with 1948 and then you can go on from there, and earlier as well. But yeah, and I resonate a lot with what you're saying because I'm in a lot of the public debate today. Like I'm out in the streets, I'm active in the Palestine movement, and I'm speaking with a lot of people on social media
Which you
from
are.
all different kind of political spectrum. You know, I'm fighting the good fight, as people are saying, and it is. You are very shocked, even when you come across progressive on the street or in a social media feed, and you question them. They say like, "Oh, finally, we have a social democrats that will win the next election," and I think a lot of people can see that happening. And it's probably going to happen that they're going to have a huge success. But when you tell them like, but you know, we don't have a left alternative. There will be no difference really. There will be a small difference. I usually say that social democrats is just the right wing with a prettier face. And when you kind of describe that to them, they get so, oh, I can't even discuss with you. You have no, you know, foot on the ground. You have checked off from reality. As soon as you just mention, I think you have to look more critically on what the social democrats are today, and they go ballistic usually. It's like, because you question their worldview, and that's a person that's in their head quite progressive. And I found that
I don't know what is progressive today.
yeah, exactly. We don't have a left alternative in Sweden. We don't have a progressive or real progressive alternative in Sweden, and people act like we do, and that I find as a real danger.
Adam, you're a young man. I'm slightly older than you. I'm 74. Soon turning 75. Sure, you know, one of the many advantages of getting older is that you can compare. You begin to have this kind of 50, 60 years perspective on things. And I tell you, this way we do politics today, and you say that there's no progressive or left. You know, I remember when it existed. I'm that old. I remember when there were difference over the political scale, when newspapers had different stories and different editorials and different angles on the Vietnam War and things like that. We gone today, it's one big unified, chromed narrative written basically by the United States. And what the only thing that really is mind-boggling to me is not that a falling empire tries to dominate and cling to with whatever means available, including military means. And what I'm surprised about are the people who cannot see that change, who are my age, and cannot see, yes, that was not the way it was. But they seemingly can't see it, or they think that the world has become unified. The Western world is okay by having one, and there's only one truth about Ukraine, and only one truth about Gaza, one truth about China. You know, the whole thing is anti-intellectual. And I used to say, and that's a nasty word in a way, but it's a political science word. We're living in a kakistocracy. Histocracy means governance by the least able and least good people. And I find it a huge enigma of our Western civilization. How could democracy end up there? How could democracy end up in the United States, if it was a democracy? That can be discussed. With only two candidates, Kamala Harris and Trump. How is this possible?
There's only one party in my head.
Why is everybody in the Western world now very totally dissatisfied with their governments? I mean, you and I are sitting here with a little knowledge, and we have no confidence in the Swedish government and what it does, or not at all that it does something to the benefit of the Swedish people. I would call these people traitors, because they put up peacetime, because they put more emphasis or give priorities to loyalty with the United States and NATO than they do with their own people, because NATO membership in this country means less security for the Swedish people. I can argue for that if you want another program, but that's a longer one. But it's never discussed. The lack of discussion is the end of democracy.
I think, like, I don't want to keep the program for too long, so I think I'm just going to do like a bigger question now, and I'm going to describe it a bit more.
You mean just a 2-hour question to answer? Yes.
Yeah, perhaps. I think it's more, we had a discussion before about that. Yeah, I don't believe in political parties or the parliamentarism as we know it today. And you mentioned as well that you don't really believe in parties. You believe in more like people movements. And I believe more in like we have to liberate the people. We have to get power back to the people. And a lot of what DM is talking about, we need real democracy. Like just for context, this is just a bit of a rant, but it's important to communicate. How do we find a better vision for better society and fight for peace? Because a lot of young people today, people are, you know, they're not intellectuals, but they're smart. Like they're ambitious. A lot of young people now are educated. Like they're getting long degrees. Like I know a lot of people that's finishing their engineering degree. All of them start working in the military and arms industry. They start working at Saab and similar options.
Where the money is?
Where the money is, most are, like, I speak with them, and most of them are anti-war. They feel that something is bad, but, you know, they're excited about technology. They want to work on technology and innovation. So that kind of trumps whatever.
Sad but true.
Yeah, and you know, the industry is taking off. It is booming. They're caught up in the hype. They don't reflect, and it's well paid. They are victims to the markets, as I say. And get caught up in the war machine and don't really know what they're doing. And even if they know, if they are aware of what they're doing, they can't. It's the only option out there. Similar to me as a young lawyer graduating, like good opportunity that would actually help the world thrive. It's so limited. It is almost impossible to find these jobs today. For me, what I want to put all my effort in, what I'm trying to encourage all my friends and all my people I meet on the street in the movements, is try to get people to organize, you know, get active in these movements. And what are your advice, suggestions, or take on this? Like, how do we inspire people to have hope and actually take action?
Thank you so much for that question. I have a kind of meta answer to begin with, a more general one. The Western world is far too obsessed with the present and the past. That applies to movements and good-hearted change agents too. We should discuss the future much more. The others have heard me say this before. I always quote George Bernard Shaw. Most people look at the world as it is and ask why. What we should do also, or more, is to look at the world as it could be and ask why not. You know, that for me is fundamental because peace research is about diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment. It's social science for treatment, exactly as medicine. You go to a doctor and he tells you that you are very ill, and you say, but doctor, what can be done? And the doctor say, I haven't got a clue. Next patient. We should discuss what would global democracy look like in the future. We should have future workshops like Robert Jung in Austria had, like Johann Galtung always suggested, let's talk about a better future. If we cannot imagine a better future and we have no good ideas about the better future, there will not be a better future. You cannot just be critical and then believe that automatically the better future will come. That's not realistic. And that's the Marxist problem. That is the problem of most social and other science. We do the empirical analysis and maybe we criticize what is not good enough. And then we leave it to politicians to create a better world. This is the most idiotic theory I've ever heard. It is our duty as intellectuals or activists to first of all say, what can be done to solve this problem and what should the future be like? And that's where we are all missing, myself and our foundation included. We have not been good enough. We've been very good at criticizing militarism, but not good enough. But we have done more than most when it comes to alternative defense, defensive cooperation between military defense and civil disobedience and civil conflict resolution, United Nations reform, because what we need is a global democracy. The bizarre thing is that the world's economy is global. The world's military is global. The world's culture is becoming global. The world's democracy and political decision-making is so much national still. I mean, you and I can only vote for who is sitting here. I even cannot because I'm a Danish citizen, but you know what I mean. You can vote for the government of the nation called Sweden. Why can you and I not vote for who represents me in NATO, in the United Nations, in the OECD? Why can't we have United Nations embassies in our countries? We all have embassies or representations in New York. Why can't the United Nations have embassies or representation in each country and have an ongoing dialogue with what is this country doing compared to what it signed up to do in New York? You know, that kind of checks and balances doesn't exist. And by the way, just having mentioned the UN turns 80 in October 24. It's in deep crisis. It's in liquidity crisis. And I want your viewers to know the following. The United Nations has 1% of what the member states use on the military. 1% for everything it does. Humanitarian work, peacekeeping, administration, etc. It's 1%. Now, as long as this is not discussed, we will not have a better world. So one thing I'd say is a much stronger United Nations made strong by the member states beginning to behave themselves, which they don't. They violate the United Nations Charter. I'm not talking about the organization. The Charter is the most Gandhian document we have ever had government sign. It says in the preamble that peace shall be established by peaceful means. There's not one country that takes that serious, except those who don't, like Costa Rica, don't have military, but Iceland. The whole European Union is violating the United Nations Charter 24/7. NATO has done it for years, particularly after invading, bombing Yugoslavia, because that's an out-of-area operation that is against the charter of the NATO. And I recommend people reading NATO's simple treaty. It's a copy of the United Nations, but it's a criminal organization. Yeah, but my point is to answer your question, try to be constructive in spite of or despite the situation looking as gloom and doom, because gloom and doom is also what we are supposed to feel when we open our newspapers or we see the primetime news. And I refuse to follow that. I do not believe that we are on the way to a big war. And I will not accept that we are having a nuclear war in 2 weeks from now. There are so many people, also intellectuals, good-hearted, geopolitical commentators who say, we're on the verge of, this and that. They don't know that. And stop saying it until you have some knowledge, because you're making people losing hope. This is not a good thing to do. even if you have cancer, you must stand up and say, I'm going to fight it. I hope I'll survive. And so positive thinking, lots of unrealistic ideas. The only thing that has worked in history were ideas like getting rid of slavery, what people considered, that's unrealistic, that can't be done. The only thing that is unrealistic is to believe that the present Western system could continue with all its militarization. And then look at the future, look at what the future could be, have future workshops, have wild discussions on the net with people in other cultures. What kind of world do we want? This is what I'm devoting my life to. I'm not devoting my life anymore to criticizing what Trump said, because they set the agenda. Trump says something, he calls a meeting, the European Union's leaders go there, and everybody talks about that. Then we waste the time for talking about real alternatives. You see what I mean? You cannot, when you waste time on what did Trump write yesterday on Truth Social, and the whole Western press and independent commentators and geopolitical analysts all sitting and talking about what Trump said. He's a master of getting attention. And we're wasting our time because when we give him attention, we give no attention to the alternatives that are perfectly possible. I would like to have a discussion about real peace in Ukraine and Europe. That's fully possible. It doesn't exist. I'm going to publish a few things about it that people will see within a week or two here, about a peace plan, not a peace plan, but a framework plan like the Chinese, but in a different way, of what could future of Ukraine be. I mean, just think of such a mind-boggling, idiotic thing. The parties are now saying, this territory belongs to me, and the other parties say, no, this territory belongs to me. What about sharing that territory and doing a benefit for all parties and a win-win out of the industrial potential of Donbass? I mean, this is so banal. You could have autonomy solutions. You could have confederation solutions. You could have all kinds of creative solutions about what do you do with a disputed territory. You can make a natural park out. I'm just spinning off.
Yeah, but
what I'm saying is all this is lacking from the political discussion.
Yeah, but it was so powerful. Just you saying, what if we think about how we share this area? Your mind, just me.
Exactly.
I'm not even I haven't read so much about on the issue, but I was like, oh man, it just opened up so much space that is non-violent and that is solution oriented.
Exactly. That's what a peace researcher and a peace activist does. It's not enough to be against something. It's beautiful to be against war and weapons that the so-called peace movement is, but that's not peace. That's not a peace movement. That's an anti-militarist movement or an anti-weapons or anti-war movement. And it's wonderful. It has my heart and my mind. I'm just saying that's necessary, but not enough. The enough thing for people working for peace or other change or a green world or whatever is to have visions about the future and then drag people into good vision discussion and then finally decide democratically which of the future scenarios do we want to follow. But not to let the bastards put up the agenda that we respond to, that we are defensively. We have to be in the offensive. Your movement should be in the offensive. Set the agenda. Push it through and require that those in power react to it. I know it's not easy, but it's a perspective I want to sell. How difficult it is remains to be seen, but we will not win the struggle for a better, more peaceful and just world if we keep on just reacting to what these guys who are way down the moral and intellectual scale. I've never seen such an intellectual disarmament coupled to military rearmament as these years. I mean, excuse me, my life is too short to be occupied 24/7 with what they say and do.
Well said. Thank you so much, Jan Oberg, for this discussion.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that end will put a lot of hope into people's hearts and mind. I know I feel a lot for my friends. I'm one of the few who are speaking up and taking these huge personal risks as you do when you speak up. And I know that people are listening and they read my articles and they have these conversations with me, and you can realize like, oh my God, I'm so thankful that you are doing it. But I also need them doing it. What you just said there is, I think it will open up a lot of people's mind and give them a lot of courage. You don't have to know everything. Have hope for the future, and try to figure out how we can share it together.
Exactly. Change the perspective. Change to the future. change to constructive thinking rather than critical thinking. It's actually quite simple. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but it's easy to think what is needed.
Yes. And that's the first act of solidarity.
That's true. Thank you so much, Adam, for giving me the opportunity. It's a delight to talk with you because you're so engaged yourself and along the same line. So it was more of a conversation than an interview, and I always appreciate that. Yeah.
And just to let you know, like, I don't think I think you know how much people like you mean to me. I think I have a lot of anxiety these days of doing these things, going into this master program. And I know that people are paid a lot of money. It's national program. And when you go into these programs and you try to prepare, there's a fine balance between, or not alienating people, and there's a balance between also being constructive. And our perspective, we're showing solidarity to everyone in the room because we all share this earth together. But at the same time, society is doing everything it can to make you feel like you are the crazy one.
And you have to follow the flock.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is,
you
again,
are
the end of
outside.
democracy. A democracy does not have flocks. It has a lot of vibrantly active individuals and small groups.
And today we have a very strong flock.
Very strong flock, and that, I would say, is a sign of the disease. Because as a culture, also political culture, cannot accept many different views, is a culture on its way down. I mean, if you're strong also as an individual, you feel good, you embrace the world, and people come to you and say, it's crap what you're saying. Then you say, oh, that was interesting. Can you tell me why it's crap? But here you say, this has to be cancelled. I'm not interested in why you have different views or why you have a different analysis of Ukraine. You have to be eradicated. You have to be cancelled. That is a sign of weakness. Tourism is a sign of weakness. Telling other people, you must be like me, otherwise I can't deal with you, is a weakness. The West is becoming very weak, where most people think it's looking very strong and military, and look at Trump, he knows where, The West is becoming terribly weak. And that is something we should be aware of, that what looks like you're supposed to be strong, we're bombing Iran, then it's done, I fixed the problem. That's all a sign of intellectual weakness. Where violence goes in, morals and intellectualism goes out.
Oof, you always think about Margaret Thatcher, like there's no such thing as society. Like it has never felt like it's more true.
Wasn't she also the one who coined the TINA concept? There is no alternative. And fact is, there are only alternatives. To the present development, I would say there are only alternatives.
Yeah.
Because it cannot go on like this.
No.
And then you will either have an explosion, God forbid, or you will have an implosion. That's the two ways the Western world can end. That's explosion or implosion. Implosion is it falls apart from inside. Nothing works anymore. Infrastructure, orders, communication, etc., economy. Or you have an explosion. And the good thing is that we had a Gorbachev who would never think of exploding anything when he saw that his system was over. The game was over. But I'm not so sure we have anybody, or rather I am sure that we have nobody like a Gorbachev in the Western world the day the United States and Washington and Brussels finds out that the game is over. And that is my only problem with the West going. It's how will it end?
Yeah. It is a valid fear because the system is built.
That's a valid fear.
It's built on violence and exploitation.
But I'm not obsessed with it. I am more interested in what comes after. And I'd like to end this on this. The world will be a fantastic place when the US empire has disappeared and NATO has disappeared and the European Union has disappeared and joined the rest of the world.
Well said.
We have a fantastic view. Think of the resources, the dynamism. Anybody who's traveled the world like I have can see how rich it is and how wonderful people are in every society. We have such resources. We have every opportunity to win the struggle for a better world. But it cannot be done with the present West. Unless the West could go in and say, if we can't beat them, we will join them. But so far, I don't see the join them. I see only we will beat them. War everywhere, confrontation everywhere, talking down anywhere, racist policies. Genocide is okay. That has to change, and hopefully it will implode and not explode. But we have a fantastic future in this humanity.
Yeah, let's join together.
Yep. Right.